All right, we should be good. Welcome to Unmuzzled Chat. Give us just a second here, folks. We're going to kick the live off on Instagram. Looks like everything's good there. And I just want to verify, due to missing a timestamp here on Rumble, that we had to do a new link. Just want to verify that we're all good here real quick. Listeners, I know you've been even potentially a little concerned because I have been on the struggle bus over here personally, but I don't want this episode to be about me or Unmuzzled. I mean, I challenge all the fellas here. These warriors, I know they'll rip their muzzles right off, and they're showing up here undoubtedly on behalf of love for each and every one of you. And let's just rip the lid off this episode. Let's expose evil. Let's expose this tyranny we're all faced with in this country in today's day and age. So I just welcome you listeners, and I welcome the guests. It is truly my honor and Unmuzzled Chat's honor to have all you gentlemen. So whoever wants to go first and just do a quick intro, I just open the floor. Go for it, Lucas.
All right. Well, my name is Lucas, and Tanuski Tahir is also in the chat. And so we wanted to essentially talk to Brad Miller, which is the forerunner of the Declaration of Military Accountability, to run through that with your audience, also to make accountability happen. So it's an honor and privilege to be here. I also have my shirt as well. I've seen Ivan Ranklin's post, COVID-19 reprimanded rank. So that's essentially what we're here to do. We're here to explain exactly what happened, but it's not just the military that has the problem, it's also the American public that had problems faced. So we're here to discuss exactly what happened and some of the ways we can go forward and fix.
I don't know about you gentlemen, but you were cutting out just a little bit. I pretty much was able to hear everything you shared there, Lucas. It's our honor, my honor, to have you here today. And I just hope this is the tip of the iceberg, because I know you gentlemen have such powerful stories to tell, and you've done your research. You are truly showing up on the front lines. Even, golly, how does one go from, their oath and willing to die on behalf of this country and get the boot, in my eyes, by fulfilling your stinking oath? You guys didn't waver with all the COVID tyranny, and it's the biggest win for me, I view, out of this episode is for you guys to gain more support from the civilian level, more organization. So whatever calls to action, I like how Lucas already brought up the military accountability. We'll definitely pull that on the screen. In fact, if one of you want to do a screen share, I could do it on your behalf. But if you want to, I gave you guys the ability and you could walk through it. Totally up to you. You can let me know. But Brad, or Tahir, either one of you gentlemen, why don't you do a quick introduction?
Okay, let the senior go first.
All right.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me. My name is Brad Miller. So I, served in the Army for a little over 19 years, and
Wow.
I ultimately resigned from the Army in early 2022. I got out in the fall of 2022, right at about 2 years ago, because of the COVID shot mandate, which I would maintain is both unlawful and quite destructive. And of course, I'm sure we'll talk about exactly why. Just prior to my overall resignation from the Army, I had been in battalion command in the 101st Airborne. I was relieved of command for refusal to comply with the mandate. And then ultimately I decided to resign altogether from the service. But yeah, like I said, that was about 2 years ago that I left the Army. The exact date that was my final day of service was September 15th, 2022. So we're we're coming up right on 2 full years since I left. But hey, more importantly than that, we're involved in a very important struggle here, not just for the life of our military, but in a very real sense. And I mean this in an unexaggerated way. We're also fighting for the life of our country. And I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that. So happy to be here, stand shoulder to shoulder with you guys, and looking forward to a fruitful discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. Same thing, Lieutenant Colonel Miller, Lucas Wozniak. I echo the same statements. My name is Tahir Sanusi, and I was also an infantry officer. My last duty station was 82nd Airborne, and that's when I had to resign forcefully. And I have the same sentiments, and I'm looking forward to shedding light on a lot of misinformation and just giving a voice to a lot of the heroes of our country that falsely were victimized by the situation. So thank you guys for having me.
It is, once again, our honor. Where to even begin? There's so many words. There's so much and so much, limited time to have you here. So I just really want to give the floor. I know on the civilian level, for some individuals listening, it was challenging, right? But as I have heard more on your guys' side of things and the service members of this great country, we can't even imagine the pressures and everything you gentlemen faced. And that's why it's just so crucial, because to get these stories out, because there's a lot of action you guys have been taking that is to everyone's benefit, facing the same evil. And it's just so crucial that we, any way, shape, or form, just gain more support. Now, I'm tripping up over my own words as I'm sitting here, and I've had a Lyme flare up, and whether you gentlemen know the origins or not, I guess it's an important time to even, because it's the same battle in a sense. It's all biowarfare, and Lyme disease dates back to the Cold War, and that's something that's been ailing people across the whole world, and especially in this country. There's a lot of doctors that are stating that more Americans more than likely have it than don't, and it's, no pun intended, a ticking time bomb the earlier you address it. So biowarfare is no joke. So I just want to touch on intention here a little bit, and I know you guys aren't showing up here. I mean, I'll even genuinely ask you, is it to push your own agenda, your own bias? Is it to manipulate the masses into your world, your will? Or is it genuinely out of love for your neighbors, for all the children of God, essentially to maintain freedom, to maintain the keys to this country and the direction we go? It's important that we get them back as civilians, because we've had a tyrannical two-tiered system we've been faced with, and we got to rule out that corruption to even have a chance. So I just want to put emphasis on individuals' health in a spiritual sense, but also in this mortal sense, because once I've been on the receiving end of this biowarfare, and it's no joke, and mine's old school. This new school stuff is no joke at all. And Lucas, I was looking at what is it? The Deagle 2025 forecast by the country. I mean, I could even pull that up, but the numbers, I don't even know if I believe what I'm seeing. A population change in the country of 68.5%. Like I can't even wrap my mind around that. I got to do more research on that. I don't know if you've dove in, but I digress. Let's just turn the floor over to you fellas and expose this tyranny and this new age biowarfare, because we just I don't think people in this country are taking it serious enough. I find it delusional that people are trying to go back to a life of normacy without addressing this. I mean, the biowarfare aspect, the corruption aspect. I mean, you choose your I may have lagged out there. Lucas, you're smiling over there. What do you got to say?
Well, I sent you a couple things. I mean, at this, late in the game, I mean, the CDC recommending 2024, 2025 booster shots. So, I mean, it's available, and that diesel forecast that you pulled up. I mean, who knows if that's an agenda? I'm not sure exactly why creators of that published that and retracted that, so it's no longer findable. But someone did save a copy years ago, and so, I mean, who knows if this is true or not? But this is just a forecast prediction of population by country.
Wow,
and
that is levels of genocide we can't even comprehend. Like those type of numbers. And it is no secret in my eyes. I'm unmuzzled, and anyone could prove me wrong. I'm just a man, but it's a genocidal shot as far as I'm concerned, and there was malintent behind the whole ordeal. So let's dive into this. You guys have supported and created and got behind right here, militaryaccountability.net. Is there anything in particular you would like me to browse or share?
I can speak to this. You can just leave it right there for the time being. So a couple things I wanted to say before we dive into this. So I think we as Americans need to understand the relationship that exists inherently between freedom and truth. Okay, they are inextricably linked, but between the two, truth is more important. Truth is more fundamental. Therefore, because truth is more fundamental, freedom is a derivative of truth rather than the other way around. And it's important that we understand the relationship, but it's important that we also understand that truth is the foundation. And so therefore, without truth, you can't necessarily have freedom. And if you really start to think about historical case studies, you will think about societies that we typically consider to have not been very free. And one of the things that those regimes have to do in repressing the people, in muzzling their populations, so to speak, is they have to muzzle people's ability so they can't share truth, right? Yes. So if we want to be a free society, we have to be a society that is willing to speak the truth. But in order to speak the truth, we have to understand the truth, and that is a severe problem that we suffer in our society. It is extremely hard to understand truth. Now, we can come back to that later. That is a big topic, but let's talk a little bit about what this is. So on the screen, people can see the Declaration of Military Accountability. So what is the Declaration of Military Accountability? Let me kind of explain this, and let me start with a good buddy of mine named Rob Green. So Rob Green, for those who may not be familiar with his name, is a currently serving commander in the United States Navy. So, he's a graduate of the United States Naval Academy. He has had a successful career in the Navy. He is still serving to this day. He is an officer who also was targeted because of his refusal to comply with the COVID shot mandate. So in that regard, he's, very similar to us. Now, he was able to kind of salvage his career just through trying to, he was one of these guys that was able to kind of hang on and got to the point in which they eventually repealed the mandate. And so therefore he's still in, and he has been fighting very courageously still within the ranks of the Navy. And I have said many times, and I will say again here, I believe that he is the most courageous military officer still serving in uniform. But Rob Green, why do I bring him up? So he wrote a book that was published on July 4th of last year, in the summer of 2023, that is called Defending the Constitution Behind Enemy Lines. I mean, I've got a copy of it right over here on my bookshelf. I've read it. It's a fantastic book. The book highlights the plight of the service member in trying to navigate this situation that came about as a result of the COVID shot mandate. So he wrote this book, and he very courageously put his name on the book rather than publishing it under a pseudonym. He put his name proudly on the cover of the book. He's a father of 7, and he will tell you that he and his wife actually came up with a plan as to what she was going to do with their family should he go to jail for what he wrote. Why? Well, not because he lied in the book. All he did was tell the truth, but he named names in the book of senior leaders in the Navy and across the Department of Defense that were breaking the law. So after the book was published, a couple of months later, as we got closer and closer to the end of 2023, Rob came up with the idea of writing an open letter to the American people. So in writing this open letter, he said, you know what? Like, what's the next step? We've written a book. We've all told our stories. We're not really catching as much traction as we would like to. What's the next step? Well, we live in a republic. What does it mean to live in a republic? If you live in a republic, it means that the people enjoy a lot of rights, but also there's a lot of responsibility that rests on the shoulders of the people. That's what it means to live in a republic. So he penned this open letter to the American people. He socialized the first draft with a couple of his friends, a small group. I was one of those individuals. And a couple people had a couple of edits. You know, we condensed it down so that we got it to one page, etc. And then we decided, let's take this open letter, which we have decided to call the Declaration of Military Accountability, and let's put it out on the streets. Let's get it into the hands of the American public. So the way in which we decided to do that was that on January 1st, I was going to send the Declaration of Military Accountability to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and several other senior military officials in an email. And I was going to simply tell them, this is an open letter that we, the 231 signatories to this letter, are putting into the hands of the American people. And this email is merely to inform you that this open letter is about to hit the streets, so to speak. Because remember, the letter is addressed to the American people. It's not addressed to senior Pentagon officials. This email in which I attached the letter was just to inform senior Pentagon officials that this open letter was about to be released to the public. So I sent that email early in the morning on January 1st, New Year's Day, 2024. And then right after I sent it out, I actually uploaded a screenshot of the document to Twitter. I think it went up on Twitter at like 4:07. The email went out at 4 a.m. The Twitter post went out at 4:07 a.m. DC time. And then we immediately had a ton of people just share that post on social media. I think it's been seen well over 4 million times now. We ended up putting it on a website. We ended up printing it out, sharing copies. We ended up sharing copies of Rob's book with senior military officials. We would purchase the books and then mail them to senior leaders. There was a lot that went into this, but ultimately it was to inform the people that we are no longer going to stand by and watch as senior military leaders continue to run this military into the ground in a way that very much looks deliberate and intentional. Second, we want the senior Pentagon officials themselves to know that we will not stand by and watch them run the military into the ground, that we are well aware of the crimes that they have committed. We are well aware that they are well aware that what they are doing is unlawful, and we're no longer going to stand for it. Because at some point you have to realize this is not just about the military. And this is so far beyond just following orders. This is about the fate of our American nation.
Wow. Couldn't have said it better, Brad. That encapsulates the importance that we all do our part. We've gotten too chillax and self-serving, selfish, self-centered, just focused on me, mine, I, and the reality of it is everyone in this country has a responsibility in showing up one way, shape, or another. That is so crucial. Anyone else?
Let me just, there's just one other point that I want to share very briefly. So, and I would encourage everyone, you can see the URL there, militaryaccountability.net or militaryaccountability.com. Both of them will take you here. So when you look at this document, it's a page long. If you read it, and I would encourage everyone out there that is listening right now to go read it. It's only one page. When you read it, you're going to realize that it is written in the voice of many of our founding documents. That is intentional. Principally, the Declaration of Independence. So there's a reason why it's called the Declaration of Military Accountability. Now, again, the purpose of this declaration is not that we're trying to separate ourselves from the government or anything like that. In fact, we're just trying to do the exact opposite. We're trying to follow the law, and we're trying to draw attention to the fact that the government, specifically the Pentagon, is not following the law. The purpose of this declaration is, much like the Declaration of Independence, is to draw attention to this long train of abuses that we are suffering at the hands of the government, and we're no longer going to stand. So when people read it, if they catch on that it kind of sounds like the language is similar to some of these founding documents, there's a reason for that. That is intentional. It's meant to kind of mirror that language because it is meant to mirror that spirit.
Wow. Golly. What you guys face, I just, once again, my hat's off to you for fulfilling your oath and standing up against this tyranny, reading through the cracks, because the reality of it is it's nothing shy of illegal mandates and criminal activity. No one to this day has received an FDA approved shot. So everything under the emergency use, like, you cannot mandate that. These pressures and manipulation, I just cannot believe as to how many fell for their tactics and manipulation. I mean, I'm not here to cast stones, right? Because if I was in anyone else's shoes, I more than likely would have made the same dang decisions, you know? But that's to your point on the criminals on the wrong side of history always, if you look into it historically, were muzzling the people. And you could see the censorship. You could see the talking heads who essentially their slave masters are and who's paying the bills. And it just, there was a lot of things engaged during this whole pandemic, and it is time for accountability. And the only way we're gonna really get that ball rolling is people start standing in front of the mirror and holding themselves accountable first, right? Personal accountability, doing the research, sourcing information is key, just like we should be sourcing our foods and such. Because I've messed up out here, and I started resorting to easy fixes and putting substances in food essentially that wasn't even really food, you know? Like, we should be questioning all that. And as we up our personal resilience, we'll gain the clarity and the path to attribute our gifts and our unique talents to this day and age. We all should be excited to do our part. And for whatever reason, we're not doing that. And I don't know if it's just due to fear. I mean, we could dive into, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in. Actually, you made a great point about we all should be excited to, do this fight. From what Brad was saying, when he was pointing out how him and senior leaders took the chance, pretty much put out a statement that could have ended really bad in the public press, and the political implications, but they did it. And that should show you just how monumental what they did was, due to the fact that us, being servicemen, I mean, there's a lot of cognitive dissonance everywhere in the world or country, but especially in the military, you could say it's more so rampant, not due to intentional reasons, but just due to, conditioning of what it takes to be a soldier. From basic training day one, you're taught uniformity, tie your shoes, walk with your left foot, eat a certain way, on time. Everything is done almost sort of with uniformity, right? So there's no time for free think. There's a chain of command for everything, So the fact that 8,000 trained, you could, like a better word, you could say robots in a sense, decided to refuse something that they didn't know anything about. And when they did their research, they said it was dangerous. And that should just show you how monumental and dangerous this vaccine is, that our service members who are leaders themselves first. Yeah. So I just want to say that was really monumental for soldiers to refuse the vaccine compared to ordinary citizen who has freedom to do anything they want. They'll go out late at night. They could drink whenever they want. We have to live by a code and a standard since the day we joined. And the fact that we turn on that standard, that should really highlight to you something that really isn't right.
That's a great point to hear. I appreciate you bringing that up. It does breathe light and hope that there are a lot of men out there and women that have been in that position that I can only imagine and stood against it. And I mean, Lucas, as we were talking earlier, my man, geez, you were. I mean, we brought up Lance Corporal's situation a bit in the conversation and just how tyrannical it got. I mean, maybe you even want to share some light on your situation. I mean, once you kind of stood against it and there were some red flags, it was like everyone around you, you became the target. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. It's just amazing to see that the people to your left and right and actually viewed you as a threat, almost as if you were the enemy. So, going back to Rob Green's book, Behind Enemy Lines, essentially that's what happened. People within our own ranks were targeted by their own government, by each other, where you would think that they were friendlies or that we were all on the same team. Apparently that's not exactly what's going on. And I get there's cognitive dissonance in that, and people didn't know exactly what they were doing. So it's never too late to come out and express sincere apology at the very least. I mean, this is the time to, before accountability is essentially held, because you can't claim innocence until, maybe there's a court martial, or maybe you're asked to go on that stand and explain why you did what you did. You don't want to get to that point and be on the wrong side of history. So that's where we're currently headed towards. And it's just a matter of time before something like that happens. So it's not really good to brush it under the rug and pretend like nothing happened and move on, because something like this will happen again in just a different variety.
Exactly. Tyranny does not end there. And I get a lot of folks that, let's say, got pressured into doing that, like, and getting this thing. The jury's out, man. The information's out there, and it is horrendous. It is unfathomable, even. But that being said, ignorance is not bliss, right? And there's Dr. McCullough. There's so many amazing individuals out there doing the real studies, and they're coming up with amazing protocols that is bringing light and health back into individuals that were actually struggling after getting this be unmuzzled bioweapon jab. It's not a freaking vaccine. There's nothing vaccine about it. This is part of the manipulation, in my eyes, is to getting people. But obviously you could agree to disagree or speak your mind on the matter. But it's important that we are honest with ourselves. We cannot pull the wool over our own eyes to our own detriment, our own families, and the freaking direction of this country. The time is right now. And thanks for embellishing on that point, Tahir, because golly, if we could just all hold ourselves accountable and be excited to do our part, I could only, we could do great and many things together.
Well, that's what we have to kind of discuss, right? What is we have to define accountability, right? And what are the levels of accountability, right? And like I was telling Brad and Lucas in the call that you were in probably a couple of days ago, this is a very polarizing topic, not just because of how controversial the vaccine is, but in terms of just service members and also the global implication of this vaccine, right? And how it's affected multiple people, families down to governments and countries. How have the ordinary citizens how has their reception to this global tyranny, how has that impacted their own individual thought and thinking? Now the second level is, how has the political sphere been impacted, or how has it shifted the political sphere in terms of their movement planning and future actions? And the third layer, we talk about how's it impacted the family, the family structure in a functioning society. So once we are able to deeply analyze each level of accountability from each of these sectors, then we could be able to come to a foregone conclusion or concise conclusion, and be able to take action after that, and you could say make something happen with this, you know. But I think it definitely starts with the individual and then goes up the chain. And one thing I also want to mention is that in terms of you know, how I mentioned before how it was very monumental for soldiers of the greatest fighting force in the world to say no, 8,000 of them. The majority of them that said no were lower enlisted, you know, the 18, 19, 20-year-old privates, right?
Wow.
Or lower enlisted. You know, very few officers, you know, refuse. But the ones that the young men and women that are taking orders, you know, are the ones that took the first step to say no, right? So that right there tells you that this is not some sort of mind warp, some sort of psychological game or really crazy deception. Even an 18, 19-year-old kid who just joined the military has all the fighting spirit. You know, everything they said no, right? So yeah, let's talk about that and what that accountability looks like for them, and then also the average citizen and people that are also involved in the political sphere. What does accountability look like? Then we can move forward.
You know, we've all been lost. This is like, to admit and actually be honest with ourselves. Like, I myself have been manipulated in huge ways in this life. Evil's been very effective for generations now in doing this, and especially in this country. I mean, the way I view it, since America's conception, we became the greatest threat to any dictator worldwide, any tyrannical ruler, right? Why? How wouldn't? I mean, so it just is clear to me that we've been under attack since its conception, and they've been, golly, lighting up the coliseums and all these ways to get us distracted from sports. I mean, all sorts of things, and then create division, and then also leading us astray with the Western medicine, leading us astray with the poisoning of the food. I mean, I can't emphasize enough on those points. Like, we don't even do parasite cleanses in this country. We're obesity is a great issue in this country, not just among adults, but among children. So how are we going to even gain the proper insight at the point we're poisoning our own brains? It's clear that we've been more than manipulated. We've been diminished as individuals in spiritual, the spiritual aspects to everything too, because I believe when people tap into that, it becomes less about themselves. They realize the big picture that we're all freaking visiting here, and it becomes more out of love for one another. And oh, sorry, I thought I heard someone trying to say something, but golly. So if we could start creating hormonal balances, nutritional balances, cleansing the body of all these toxins, then I believe we could more so fall into our roles and be honest with ourselves as to, you know what, there is a level of social conditioning, and I need to rewire my brain. So that initial acknowledgement that, wow, I've been listening to talking heads for a long time. I've been under the delusion of Fox News and CNN that we have been given a choice. They're owned by the same dang people, you know? So to really fall into, it's healthy to question things. It's crucial that we question things, and it boils down to, in this information age, that we freaking source our information. Quit showing up to the places that have lied to you, you know, and we got to call it for what it is. And I'm just grateful for places like Rumble that promote free speech. And we don't know how long of a window we even have on this platform, right? Whether it gets corrupted, but we got to utilize it to our benefits right now and just get everyone over to absorb more so free speech. We got to allow to be wrong and have these discussions so we can actually hone in on the right direction from there. But anyway, yeah, that's kind of back to Brad's point, the dangers of censorship, the control, and that's why I feel it's crucial to just really admit, and I mean it, and I'm not just saying it, like I've been duped, I've been manipulated, and to this day I'm working out to rewire myself and be my own, like, critical, like what happened to critical thinking, that's just a cornerstone that we all need to establish within ourselves, and it just becomes more and more important. But to that conversation, go ahead.
I think there's a couple directions we could go now.
Yeah.
One is to discuss accountability, what that looks like in the abstract, what that looks like specific to what we're talking about with the whole shot mandate and other issues that are going on. And then there's this other topic of what about truth? What about just, people breaking through the social conditioning, people taking charge of their own health, people being much more interested, and when I say interested, like much more personally invested in determining what they believe and actively seeking out the truth, as opposed to just being in kind of receive mode and accepting whatever they're given, which ultimately is a type of conditioning, more often than not. So with the accountability question, there are mechanisms of accountability that already occur. The problem with the COVID shot mandate is, how do you seek accountability and achieve accountability for something of this magnitude? Because when things of this magnitude have happened in the past, unfortunately, history teaches us there will be zero accountability. We just have to understand that. Therefore, that does not mean that accountability cannot be achieved now, but it does mean historical inertia would show us that it's going to be very difficult to achieve accountability. Achieving accountability for this would actually be a departure from what has happened in the past. We have to understand that. I can go through several historical examples of where no accountability was achieved in the past for very significant events, just to name a few. 9/11, and if we need to talk about that, we can. Zero accountability from the true perpetrators.
Right.
Okay, we're as a country, we are still collectively following an entirely false narrative about 9/11. We went and fought a 20-year-old war, a 20-year war based on a narrative that was total bullshit. There's no other word.
100%.
That's just one case. The assassination of President Kennedy in 1963. Zero accountability. There's no American, with a higher than room temperature IQ that believes that Lee Harvey Oswald was acting as a lone wolf and shot Kennedy. I mean, just nobody believes that. It's almost a joke. It's almost a joke. It's a meme as to how few Americans believe that, because it's almost none. So my point is, 60 years later, zero accountability, which means those perpetrators, and I realize that some of them are probably no longer alive, but the systems and the institutions that carried out that act are still around, and they're still doing the same types of things. The people may be less familiar with this one, but the incident that occurred, but not really, in the Gulf of Tonkin, which then led to the Vietnam War, the death of 58,000 service members. All based on lies. So here's my point. My point is, you have these huge incidents that occur. They're totally fraudulent. They are only destructive. And yet collectively as a people, not only do we allow them to happen, but decades later, we still don't demand accountability. And in fact, what we do is collectively as a nation, we forget, we move on, something worse happens.
Yeah.
And instead of demanding accountability for that, collectively as a nation, we forget, we move on, and then something even worse happens. Because I will tell you, what happened with the whole COVID shot mandate is exponentially larger than what happened with 9/11. But because there was no accountability from 9/11, why should it surprise anybody when 20 years later a COVID happened? So here's my point. If we do not demand accountability right now for COVID, it should surprise no one when something worse happens. It should surprise no one.
Yeah.
So I don't know how much truth or accuracy to attribute to the Deagle report. I've also seen the Deagle report. I've heard other people, kind of weigh in on what they think about the Deagle report, regardless of how accurate that may or may not be. Here's what we do know. Here are the facts. We know that there's an agenda out there called 2030. Okay. Yes. We also know that China, and we can talk about whether or not China is a true enemy or the true enemy of the West, or whether there are other things at play beyond just this this supposed competition and rivalry or adversity between the East and the West. But regardless, we do know that for the Chinese, they have a mark on the wall, and that mark is 2049. Okay, and we're dangerously close to that. We're less than a quarter century from 2049. But this is considered to be the last century. So from 1949 to 2049 has been this century in which the Chinese have sought to overcome the humiliation that they suffered in the previous century, from the mid 1800s up through 1949. What happened in 1949? That's when we saw the end of the Chinese Civil War, ended in the victory of Mao. Mao consolidates power after defeating the nationalists under Chiang Kai-shek. Of course, they go to the island known as Formosa, which is now called Taiwan. I mean, this is how we get the whole situation with China and Taiwan. But my point is that if the Chinese look at 1949 as a watershed year in which they ended what they call the century of humiliation, and they opened up the new century, which will culminate in the year 2049. And by that year, they want to be the primary superpower in the world. Now, is China our greatest threat? We can quibble about whether that is or is not the case, and whether or not China is a real foil or adversary to the, kind of the Western Atlanticist notion of the New World Order. We can discuss all that, but China is a threat. Are they the primary threat? Maybe that's up for debate, but they certainly are a threat, and they are certainly getting stronger, and they have some very deliberate strategic things that are in motion, and we're getting weaker, and we're getting significantly weaker. And part of that is because our own government views the people as its enemy.
Wow, Brad. Once again, well said. My gosh, to go into accountability to such degree of tapping into history. I mean, there's so many other personally beneficial events that took place in this country. There were doctors upon doctors throughout history that have, you don't say the cured word, but they came up with the cure to cancer, things to that nature. And what happens? They die a mysterious death. They were suicided. They literally were murdered because the outcome is completely unacceptable. Just like the outcome the tyranny you guys faced, and on the civilian level, it is it's unbelievable as to how we're willing to just sit back. I feel we discredit ourselves because we've been so poisoned, so demoralized. Yeah. Evil's been effective in that way.
It's intentional. So like, you mentioned the food. So what does the food have to do with what we're talking about today? Well, actually, it has a lot to do with it. Now, I know you know that, but for people who are listening and they might say, yeah, but okay, I understand that food's a problem, but what does it have to do with this? Food is a weapon, okay? Now we know that historically, because if you look, if you remember history class from high school, you will think about times in history in which regimes either starved their own people, which means they very much understood food or the lack of food could be weaponized, or they put in military blockades to starve another people as part of as a war measure. So there are evil people out there who understand that food and that the access to food is a lever that you can pull as a control mechanism. That is 100% true. But what happens if you give people crappy food? Well, what happens when they are obese? What happens when people are in a perpetual state of brain fog that is so severe that they actually don't realize they're in a perpetual state of brain fog because they've forgotten what it's like to think lucidly and clearly? Yes. If that's the case, how much easier is it then to control that population? Now, I got two of the points I want to make, and then I'll shut up here, right?
Love it.
So lest anyone get confused about what I just meant when I said that history teaches us that accountability will not happen. I don't want people to get confused by what I'm saying there. I am not saying accountability will not happen right now. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if we follow the historical trajectory, accountability will not happen. So there's kind of like this inertia we've got to work against in order to make sure that accountability happens. We have to get off the road that we as a nation have been on for decades and decades and decades in order for accountability to happen. That is what I want to happen. So what does accountability look like? And we can get more specific in a moment, but let me just lay it out. There's accountability that can happen inside the military. There are mechanisms in place for that. There's the Uniform Code of Military Justice. There are certain kind of organs within the military that are called the Inspector General. I mean, there are ways in which accountability, what's one of the hallmarks of a profession? Well, self-policing, right? So that's a big deal in the military, or at least it should be if the military functions properly. But if we are in a situation right now where we think it's not likely that the military is going to hold itself accountable, well, then what else? How else do you achieve accountability? What happens if you go outside the military? Well, then you've got to go to the greater government, and you've got to look at this one portion of the government, the Department of Defense. And then you got to go somewhere else in the government, and you got to see if they will hold the Department of Defense accountable. So where do you go? Do you go to the Department of Justice? I mean, where do you go? Does the Attorney General get involved? Does Congress get involved? Do the courts get involved? Because so far, that has not necessarily happened. Why? Because the problem is so much bigger than just the military. The problem is the government. I'm not saying abolish the government. What I'm saying is that our government has declared the people to be its enemy. And if people think that I'm exaggerating when I say that, again, I would just say, well, but look at what's going on. Look at what's going on with our food. Look at what's going on with these wars, built on lies. Look at what happened with 9/11. Look at what happened with the COVID shots, or the use of remdesivir, or the coercion that we faced by not taking the shots, or the lockdowns, or people who lost their jobs, or the mom and pop shops that were shut down, but then the billionaires got richer because the big box stores, consolidated much more of the market, cornered much more of the market. And there's a word that people need to become familiar with if they already are not familiar with it. And that word is democide. So what is democide? Democide is when people are killed by their own government. People need to understand that phenomenon because it's real and it's happening.
Wow. One of the most profound takeaways. I mean, everything you said, once again, is just kind of gold. And that's why I want to put emphasis on folks to support. And I really want to tap into what you gentlemen have been doing since fulfilling even your oath and gotten the boot. It's like you're showing up in even more impactful ways, I feel, than you could have ever, run around with the rifles or, in your positions of service. But, the fact that they've been so effective on diminishing folks to not even know, it's that analogy of the frog in hot water, right? You could place one in that hot water, it's going to hop right out. But if you slowly crank it up, they just don't even know till they're freaking boiled. And there literally has been a poisoning of our spirit, poisoning of our minds in a long time. I mean, there's so many ingredients to, not just ingredients, but also like food, things labeled food in this country that are illegal in 30 other countries. Like, we got to grasp that, and we just slop it up like it's food here, and like thinking we're like it's not having an impact, but it's literally that stove just getting cranked up. And we wonder why all these illnesses, all these diseases are running rampant, and we're barely able to function. We're barely squeaking by with finances. Because everything by design is just squeezing and diminishing us to the point like we are discrediting ourselves as this country, like individuals. And what difference can I make? That right there, my friends, is proof of a diminished man or woman, whoever would state that. Like, well, what different? I'm just going to focus on my job, my career. You're negating the responsibility you have as this, like all our founding fathers, everyone that's fought and bled and died for this country, a disservice. They're rolling over in their graves, so to speak, because it's just like, what did they die for? Just for you to give everything up? Are you freaking kidding me? We all stinking have a role to play, and we got to be excited to do that. I don't mean to be kind of like cracking a whip, but it's like I want people to show up to secure their own future, their own, let's just say, light, and fulfill the reason why they were put in this time, because we were not put in this time to just sit idly by and get cooked, right? Like we all.
Yeah, so I want accountability to happen. I believe that accountability can happen. I do believe, though, that it is going to be difficult to achieve. So people need to understand
100%.
that. So I get asked a lot, and it's a totally valid question. Hey, what do we do? Completely valid. There's no easy answer, and there are no risk-free options, but it's still a valid question. And then a lot of people get frustrated, and again, it's totally understandable. I get frustrated too, but people get frustrated because they feel like we haven't like what we've done hasn't yielded the results that people want to achieve. And they're right to get frustrated. It's totally understandable. But we did not get here overnight. We got here because of decades and decades and decades and decades of apathy on the part of the American people for a variety of reasons, but apathy is one of them. And, and control being done by certain, very powerful people and networks of control and, crime syndicates, et cetera. But we're not going to get out of this without it being a long, enduring, steep uphill slog. Like it is what it is. And there are still a lot of people. So we don't need a majority in order to be successful. What we do need, though, is an active, vocal, very, very engaged minority of whatever that percentage is. I'm sure we could talk about what we think it is, but whatever it is, it's got to be more than it is right now, because we have people who think like us, but they're still on the couch, and they got to get off the couch.
That's it.
Then we would see more things start to turn in our favor.
Yeah, I'm Brad. I don't know if you saw the text message I sent you after we talked about the organization aspect of this whole situation. Like I mentioned before, like there's a lot of polarity, in every sector, the religious, the family, the political. You would think that, if your own fighting force, the men and women, not to echo the same statements again, but the men and women who put on a uniform and go fight for the country, if they can stand up, against tyranny, what did you think that would inspire the common, citizen to say, man, the bravest people in our country are standing up against this, so why can't we also? You know what I mean? But unfortunately, that's not the case. But with every movement, every sort of organization or every sort of effort, it takes an organization, right? But the problem is it's just so much polarity with the whole, people, like even people in religious groups, right? Some churches are saying take the vax. Some churches are saying don't take the vax. Even in the most conservative religious groups like the Muslims, right? They're telling you, hey, some Muslims are telling them to take the vax. Some Muslims say don't take the vax. Any religious group. Also, family structure. Families are divided between the vaxxed family, the unvaxxed family. So there's so much division on top of the division that's already been set. About social divisions, race, whatever case you want to call it. So it is definitely a beast that needs to be fought. But the problem is though, like what Brad mentioned. There's no what is a quantifiable solution to this, right? Everybody wants to ask, what is the solution? And Brad's saying, hey, it doesn't. Rome wasn't built in a day. It starts with stuff like this, right? Talking about it and conversing about it. People tuning in, listening, hearing people, give their opinions about it, and hopefully that can stir somebody's, mental clarity and to get them to take action upon it. But at the same time, I don't think that's still enough, right? I think people, just like we have an army, that standing army that represents us. People have multiple groups, just even as like Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts. It's a psychology of human nature to be organized, right? It's just human psychology. Individuals are not. That's why the herd mentality, all this stuff. and we don't think as individuals. Since the dawn of man, we've always thrived the most when we're in communities, right? So us being in the military community, especially us talking here, we're a small minority, you know, it's a very small minority. And even within us, some of us just want, you know, accountability to, that's why I asked what is accountability, right? Some of us, our accountability for us looks like, hey, I just want my back pay. You know, it's been 2 years, I probably stacked up maybe $100,000 of back pay. I just want that and go back to do my job, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have some guys on the forefront like Brad who are, you know, linking up with senior officers and trying to, you know, go ahead and start a movement to take on the bigger agendas that we got going on. And we also have guys like you who are starting podcasts and trying to just, you know, want the accountability to be able to have, you know, have people inspired to take on better ways to, you know, be healthy and stuff like that. So we have to be able to unite and organize. And in my opinion, just from my observation, listening to you gentlemen, I think it definitely starts with the core of the military, because we're the most organized. We're the most organized citizens in this nation. You know, we've been taught to be organized. We know what a functioning organizational structure looks like, right? So something maybe like a think tank, maybe a political lobby, you know, some type of organization that we can use to propel a voice, to be able to voice to these leaders in the government, you know, what our grievances are, and also what we want to protect us for any future, you know, stuff that might happen. Just something stable in place that, you know, multiple people can join, and it will stay throughout centuries. Like NRA's been there for a long time. They've been trying to take the NRA down for how many years, right? You know, we just need some type of stable organization that will represent us and generations to come, sort of just as a barrier for any future, you know, like Brad said, this is just the tip of the iceberg. You know, this is not even the tip of the iceberg. This is just the beginning. It's going to get worse and worse. So what do we have in place as a preventative measure? Is, you know, after a while, I'm not trying to digress here, but podcasts are, you know, it's a trend right now, right? And people are going to tune in podcasts. People are going to talk about it, but they want us to forget about this conversation. I'm sorry, they want us to forget about it. We can only do so many podcasts, right? And we can only talk about the topic so many times. You know, let's have some sort of structure in place, and it starts with us.
I love that. Oh my gosh. Let me highlight something, fellas. Something more powerful than words. People could potentially even ask that very question. Well, what do I do? You guys are doing it. You're leading by example in this very moment. I want people to acknowledge, like, boom, you guys are unmuzzled. How much, let me ask you this. How much did Unmuzzled Chat pay you, gentlemen, to be here today? Nothing. Okay, that's saying something, right? That's saying something. That's kind of proving intent right there. That you guys are genuinely see the corruption. You see all these red flags. You see the direction we're going in, and it's nowhere good. And you know, and you've highlighted it so eloquently that tyranny isn't going to end here. And it's not if, it's when the next more horrific things happen. Right? That's why they're trying to disarm the populace. That's why they're trying to diminish us so and divide us so. Tahir's point, holy smoke. Yeah. The oldest war tactic in the book, divide and freaking conquer. And they've been too dang effective in this freaking country. We need to unite, create that organization you just spoke of, and create solutions. And what you guys are doing it's just that. What Brad brought up, and you guys all support this militaryaccountability.net. And that's real action. That's real organization. I challenge every of the listeners to go into the comment. It's not even the comment, the description of this episode. Click on the link. I believe that's included down in there, and read that one page. It's very simplistic and is beautiful. All the other links you guys got, that's creating organization. And the way I see it, fellas, is you guys have been getting organized. And you're leading the charge in a huge way. If the people could just start supporting you financially by sharing episodes like this, creating momentum, having those discussions at the dinner table, talking on intent, lay your intent right out there from your unvaxxed and vaxxed family that, look, I'm just showing up out of love. I don't want this to diminish your light. I want you to be in charge of your mind, in this life and secure our stinking future. And when you lay out the intent, and you're more effective on like listening and seeking to understand individuals, then it's those little wins and unifying at the dinner table and in our communities that we can give the proper support to fellow and individuals that already are doing the hard lifting. You guys are already doing a lot of the hard lifting. What other solutions do you see? What other action is being done other than this military accountability? I know you guys got Brad's tearing it up on some of the social platforms. You're ripping off your muzzle. So to plug what you got going on, any of you gentlemen, chime in.
Well, since you're asking for that, and then I'll address Tahir's point, because I think it's a great point. But so if people want to read some of the stuff that I've written, I do write quite a bit on my Substack. People can just find that at my name. So it's bradmiller10.substack.com, bradmiller10.substack.com. People can go there. They can write. They can read some of the stuff that I've written. So, we had a conversation, whenever it was, a couple of days ago, and we spoke about some of these exact same topics. And Tahir brought up some of the same questions then. And so I think in Tahir's mind, and by all means, correct me if I'm wrong here, Tahir, what I hear you saying is, hey, I think we need to be more organized. There needs to be a little bit more of a formal structure to what we're doing. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. So here's what is happening, yet outside of some sort of single cohesive, architecture of an organization. Okay. So are people speaking out through podcasts, through speeches, or through writing, whether it's books or whether it's op-eds or Substacks or whatever? Yes. Are there people who are engaging with political representatives, and are there people within this movement that have run for office? Yes. Are there people within this movement who are part of certain, think tanks, to use the term that you used, or other organizations? Yes. Are there people who are engaged in lawsuits? Yes. Some of them have been successful. Many of them have not. So there are many things that are happening. Now, Tahir, I agree with everything you said. And other people have also voiced the same concern, is that, hey, we've got this movement of people, but a movement is not the same as an organization per se. And there are people who have referred to the Declaration of Military Accountability as an organization, but it's not exactly an organization, but maybe it is a movement, but there's no, like Rob Green or me, we're not the president or the co-presidents or the whatever, or the chairman or whatever of the military accountability, organization or whatever, because it doesn't really exist. That doesn't mean that Rob's not an informal leader within the military accountability movement. Okay. So I say all that to say a lot of stuff has happened. There have been some successes. There have been a lot of ways in which we have not been as successful as we would have liked to have been, because we are fighting Leviathan. And we have to understand that. It's going to be that uphill slog that I spoke about. It's going to take a long time. So maybe one of the ways in which we fight more effectively and more efficiently is in a more organized way. This is kind of what I think you're saying. And so while I don't necessarily disagree, it's what exactly does that organization look like? What are the stated objectives of that organization? And here's why I say that. It's that even within the movement, you have a lot of people who have some objectives in common, but they don't have all objectives in common. And even where they do have some objectives in common, they disagree about the strategy to arrive at those objectives. For some people, this is what they are exclusively focused on. And then other people that are also focused on this, but they see this as just one component in a much wider strategy, And then other people are, they care about this, but they're kind of like what you mentioned. they care about this, but ultimately they just want their back pay to be reinstated, and then they'll kind of move on from this, and they'll just go back in the military and do whatever they want. And others are, they think that that's just scratching the surface of accountability, and they are seeking, much, much more. So that's where we have struggled to put some sort of more formalized organization into place. So I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you at all. I'm just maybe providing a little bit of context as to why that maybe has not necessarily happened yet.
Yeah, I mean that's a great point. And just for me, I'm looking more so from a middle ground perspective, right? I mean, we already have so much commonalities in terms of, I'm when I'm saying this, I'm mainly referring to the service members, right? That's what I'm referring to. So we already have so much commonalities, within us, just being brothers and sisters in arms already from the beginning. But so why is it? I mean, you mentioned you sound like you've had these talks already. Many
times.
Yeah. You sound like you had these. So
I'll give you one example. And I've told you guys about this before, but so there are several organizations that I have worked with in some capacity or another, right? And there's an organization that I do volunteer work right now. We just had a conference last weekend, and that is the military chapter of Children's Health Defense, right? And so that organization already existed, Children's Health Defense. A lot of people who are familiar with that organization are familiar with them because of their education and advocacy efforts when it comes to understanding vaccine risks, particularly parents understanding the risk of vaccines for children. But there were so many people over the last couple of years in the military that were trying to figure out how to navigate the mandate. They started looking for resources. They came upon CHD, Children's Health Defense, and lo and behold, a little bit of time passes, and a military chapter within that overall organization was created. There were already state chapters that existed underneath the structure of the CHD parent organization. So that's just one organization. In my paid capacity, in my paid job, there are other things that I do as well for other organizations that are also trying to, fight this as well. For example, I do some work for an organization known as IPAC-EDU. So IPAC stands for the Institute for Pure and Applied Knowledge. And yes, I do get paid. I mean, everyone's got to make a living. So this is some stuff that I actually do in a paid capacity. The stuff that I do for the military chapter for CHD is all just, volunteer work. But IPAC-EDU is an education forum that I work for. And again, I'm being transparent by saying that, yeah, that's a paid job. And but the purpose of that is to educate people who are looking to learn more about a variety of topics. And people can go to ipac-edu.org to learn more about that. I've taught a couple courses there. The reason I even share this at all is because there are some organizations that already exist. Now, some of them are businesses, like for-profit businesses. Others are nonprofit organizations, and others are, whatever, right? I mean, there's a variety of organizations that exist for a variety of purposes, but many of them are well-intentioned. So anyway, I don't know that I necessarily had a point in sharing that.
Yeah. No, I love that. Thank you for those sources. And any of you gentlemen at any point, like even after this, think of any of these, whether they're nonprofit or they're for profit, but they got a great mission in front of them. Give me the links. I'd love to plug it in this episode, even research it myself, talk on it myself, and plug it futuristically as well, because that's so crucial. I love how to hear, once again, solutions, organization. It's a big part of this. And for me, in a huge way, it's just, you look around and you see as to how so many of these war tactics, because it's genuinely what I feel it is, that fifth generation warfare has shown up at all of our doorsteps. Our children, through even those inoculations, it's to be researched, right? And so many are speaking out that it actually all needs to be pulled and restructured from ground zero because it's got so far astray and it's actually leading now to no good. But I'm going to get lost in my own points here. But yeah, there it is. We'll call it lime brain. Can you see how important it is that we maintain our freaking health? Like, I've taken a break off of this and I feel super rusty, and I apologize, fellas, but you guys are coming in shining colors, and I cannot be more excited to even have y'all back on, even on a personal capacity, because I believe there's obviously so much to talk about. There's so much to get organized on, and your authentic stories, I guarantee, will resonate with more and more people. So it's just important. Let's put some emphasis to the listeners to get this message out. You know, I know the intent of these men is pure, and you know, we're all flawed, but together we can. Oh, I guess that was the ending point there I had was it really does become irrelevant in my eyes whether we right this ship in this life or not. I mean, I personally follow the Bible pretty profoundly in my life now, and it does seem like a spiritual battle. And that fifth generation warfare it's harder to acknowledge than traditional warfare because we're used to history being bombs and missiles and things of that nature, but this is, you know, biological warfare, spiritual warfare, physical through all these tactics, from shots to food to even the poisoning of our environment, from lotions and cleaners and, you know, our water sources, and then the dang chemtrails in the sky. I cannot believe as to how folks are just running all, and not doing their research and not believing what their own eyes are like seeing. By their own definition, as far as a contrail, like the ice crystallization cannot last all freaking day and dissipate the way it does. It is indisputable that we are being sprayed. And when you look into the actual studies and what we're being sprayed, because that becomes the next question, it is nothing other than poisonous. And there's aluminum and barium and plastics and things that hinder our light and our just mental abilities. And it leads to Alzheimer's and such. And it's going to lead to how we're all kind of seemingly dealing with amnesia and not seeking that accountability generation after generation. Like, so it becomes more so about saving lives, saving spiritual lives in this existence, whether we right this ship or not, kind of is irrelevant. It would be nice to see to end some of that suffering, but to bring people into their purpose is paramount, right? And go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say that I love what you just said. Like, this is amazing, especially when you tie in a spiritual element to it. I think it's amazing. Now, a lot of people nowadays like to stray away from religion and those type of topics, but right. I respect you so much for embracing that. And I just want to also bring an interesting twist, you know, to what you said. You know, I know throughout this podcast, I've talked about, you know, divisiveness and so much polarity going on, but I also want to take a time to reflect on just the few commonalities that we all share as human beings, especially from the religious perspective. So for me, I'm a practicing Muslim, and not only that, but I'm also an immigrant from a country called Chad in Central Africa.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So my purposes for joining the U.S. Army were actually more so very idealistic. You know, you know, coming from Chad, I was about 6 years old, and my family immigrated to the United States, and ever since, you know, Chad is a war-torn country. You know, anybody knows about Chad, but it's a war-torn country in Central Africa. And so my family, also my family's originally from Libya, so they fled the Libyan war. They came to Chad, and there's another, you know, war in Chad, you know, instability. So they came to the United States. And growing up in the United States, you know, I felt a sense of freedom and just the American dream that everybody speaks of. I felt that, deep to my bones and my core. And, I joined the military in 2014. And I did it for those reasons. The U.S. gave my family and I so much, that I felt a higher calling to, to give back. I know this sounds really cliche, but one of the speeches I remember in high school was John F. Kennedy, because I was thinking about joining the Peace Corps. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country, So for me, I was like, man, I've done nothing for this country. The country did everything for me, did everything for me.
Wow.
So let me join the Army, So right after high school, I literally waited. I already joined senior year, but I had to get my high school diploma in order to be able to officially, enlist. So, so I literally the first day when the last day when senior year was over, I literally went straight to the recruiting office. Literally that same day, June 10th, 2014, got my diploma, walked straight to the recruiting office and joined and signed it out the line. And so for me, and it was such a joy in listening, and I enjoyed it so much. And I also wanted to serve the country at a higher capacity because I wanted to make change. Not just in the world, but just within the Army itself. And for me, I was like, man, there's a higher calling to this. I want to be an officer. I want to be able to serve the country at the highest possible spectrum. And that's why I joined the ROTC at Morgan State University in Baltimore, Maryland. I studied political science, hoping I could be, some about a military intelligence, somebody, or just somewhere in the world, somewhere in the Army where I can be, in the Pentagon somewhere, so that's why I chose that major. And then come senior year, I joined the infantry. It wasn't something that God led me to the infantry. You know what I mean? It just happened that God led me to the infantry. What better way to serve your country, be in the front lines, the weapon, and go ahead and charge into the enemy, And so I became an infantry officer, went to Fort Benning, did the whole thing. And, and so for me, I stood out a lot. I'm just being honest with you, African infantry officer and very few African Americans in the infantry and combat arms in general in the U.S. military, right? So I stood out a lot, but that didn't mean anything to me, right? So, and not only that, but I was also a Muslim, a practicing Muslim at that. I prayed 5 times a day, I fasted and everything. But regardless of that, what made me feel accepted was the fact that my brothers and sisters in arms only saw this, right? The green. That's all they saw, right? And so I say that to say that, if a guy like me who's, has come from such a diverse background and is echoing these statements, about the vaccine, about the injustices going on, for me, it felt like literally a slap in the face. I joined for such high reasons, high purposes, I felt it in my core to join. But then the U.S. government comes and tells me, hey, just get middle finger to everything you stood for when you joined. That's literally how it felt. Literally, I was crying. Middle finger. I was harassed. I was looked down upon. I felt humiliated and embarrassed. And I was like, man, this is the country. I respect the country. I respect America for what it stands for, but what's going on here, this is not the country that I love. This is not it. This is not right. We need to restore it back to where it needs to be. Okay.
Yes.
So that's what I'm saying. Like, just with go back to the religious thing, as a Muslim, yeah, they were telling us, hey, even the Muslim communities, hey, don't take the vaccine. Some were saying, do take the vaccine. Christian communities saying, don't take it, do take it.
Right.
So I say, regardless of that, at the end of the day, we all believe in God. Right. And all of us need to just realign on that purpose of the higher being that we worship, and use that to just bring us together and just unite in this whole COVID, world domination, whatever thing that's going on. Forget the religion titles, just we're believers in God, and that should be more than enough for us to, unite and, keep this thing going forward.
That spiritually guides us and keeps the bigger picture. and we're just so dang human. I feel more flawed than the most of yous, but we just get so wrapped up with the feel, smell, taste, touch of this existence, and get so wrapped up and forget, like, dude, 10 out of 10 of us aren't going to make it. We're all visiting. You know what I'm saying? So it's so paramount to hear you got a glow about you, brother. It'd be awesome to have you back and go more in depth, because I believe, the whole Muslim, it would be great to capture what all that more so is about in depth on this very podcast. As a Christian man myself, it's like there's a lot I don't know, right? And the fact, like, you just nailed it so beautifully, that we're just all kind of children in the sense, and we can unite under that and not let it be a division, right? Like so many of these leaders in these organized religions unfortunately get wrapped up in that same type of division tactic, and they're corruptible individuals in organizations themselves, and we got to recognize that. And that's why I feel it's relationship and seeking that spiritual journey on an individual basis and direct connect. You don't need any stepping stools. It's a direct connect, and then we could find really truly our will and our meaning and purpose in this existence. So I find that beautiful, and I'd love to go more in depth on it. Lucas, you've been over there just looking handsome the whole time. It seems like you've had a couple things to say. Did you want anything? Did you have something to share?
No, I just wanted to share one last thing, and that's always to look forward towards the future. So, we have obviously an election coming up in November. Hopefully we can get those results in. And, hope for the best, plan for the worst. So, RFK's backing Trump, his views. I'm pretty sure everyone knows RFK's views. And hopefully he can get in there and reach out to people in this group and get them in positions where change can actually happen. That's the most hopeful, positive, optimistic thing that we can look forward to in the next couple months. And, no one's going to give up, putting forth their energy and their time to find these solutions. We just need the right people in the right places, and hopefully that's going to work out. That's trying to stay positive, and of course, at the end of the day, the American people just need to start asking themselves questions of, if something were to happen, let's just say a false flag, right? Be open-minded and ask questions of, like, what's actually going on behind the scenes. Like, why is this event occurring?
It's a good point.
What are the primary reasons of whatever is to come next? And people have their predictions, right? But if the only thing I have to say is that if you are ignorant, or if you're working for evil, and if you don't know that it's evil, you will eventually be a victim of that evil. So it's important to know that it's not okay to be working in an organization where you don't know the exact intent of that organization is, or if you're voting a certain way, supporting policies that are killing innocent people. I mean, if you don't know that that's happening, or if you're trying to justify it, I mean, there's a place reserved for you, after this life. So keep that in mind. Always try to do the right thing. That's all I can say.
I love that. I really do feel it boils down to personal accountability in this country once again, and not being deceived. We've all once again been manipulated and deceived in a sense by both good and bad, in this world. But I feel there's a false sense of security relying on any one individual to ride in on a white horse. I truly believe it boils down to the unification in this country. United we stand. That's what it boils down to. I love the American First agenda, because the reality with this level of corruption, we can't show up anywhere else in this world at any real capacity with this corruption. So we got a clean house here. And once we do that, I really feel we can more so effectively show up in other arenas. But I mean, whether it's Trump, whether it's any individual, we gotta unite in such a way that these individuals, like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the power and the infrastructure built out by these elitists or globalists, whatever you want to call them. When we, the people, the numbers show up, like Brad was saying, it doesn't have to be everybody, but a high enough percentage of people that are showing up profoundly enough, that's all it takes. Because now it doesn't matter the money, the bribes, the threats, because the reality of that situation is they're going to have to answer to the people, and that should be the greatest threat for those individuals. And then we can actually put people in the service roles and have things operate by, like, as it was designed. I feel there's proper checks and balances we need to institute additionally to ensure, these book deals and that type of corruption doesn't happen. So, I mean, it's as a collective. Not any one of us has all the answers, but together, like, we sure can find them,
Yeah, I mean, I know it doesn't seem so far-fetched. Like, people have to wake up, There's guys like me, African Muslim infantry officers, standing up for this thing. And there's plenty of guys just like me out there, plenty of Black Muslims or infantry officers that have those same sentiments. That should tell you clearly right there that there's no division with this thing. There's no need to be division. There's plenty of people that think like this. Just because I'm here on this platform speaking doesn't mean there's a bunch of others like me. Like, this thing is not about. And this is not about individual. It's not about this and that. It's about a humanity, right? Americans and humanity, So it all goes hand in hand. There's no need for division. Be united more than ever.
Brad, you look like a few points there you were going to chime in on when Lucas or anyone.
Yeah, I really enjoyed Tahir sharing his story. Now, a little bit of that, I was a little bit familiar with it because he's told me some of that on a phone call previously, but I was not aware of all of it. So I thought that was great. And it's kind of funny because, Tahir, I mean, you clearly have a little bit of a different background than me. That said, though, I can identify with some of the idealism that led you into the Army, because it's kind of similar to the idealism that led me into the Army. So that's just pretty interesting to see your background you have, which is very unique, very special in some ways, kind of what happened in your life for you to end up here in the United States and then later into the military. But some of that, you mentioned how it's almost like a little bit cliche or maybe even a little bit hokey, but you mentioned that very famous Kennedy speech, or, just some of these sentiments that people grow up with. But I kind of grew up with some of those same sentiments too. So that totally resonates with me. I grew up in a very patriotic household in a patriotic part of the country. I'm from North Carolina, and surrounded by people in my community that were largely, just good people, proud to be Americans, and many of them were religious people or people who would go to church on Sunday. A lot of them kind of in my community where I grew up with. So I can totally understand that, even despite the differences in kind of some of where we're from, but the way in which we both ended up in the Army, I totally get it. I totally understand that. So then fast forward and you realize, hey, this isn't the country that I thought I was from, or the country that I thought that I would be defending by joining the military. I mentioned 9/11 earlier, so just to give people some timeline context. So I entered the military academy at West Point before 9/11 happened. 9/11 occurred when I was right as I was beginning my third year at West Point, so my junior year. And then, so obviously that was in September of 2001. I had just started my third year at West Point. I would graduate in May of 2003 and go into the Army. I got out in 2022, 19 years later, right? The other thing that I wanted to say, and I don't want people to get confused by what I'm saying, but I would never, ever diminish what's going on in some of these war-torn lands across the world. Because you kind of mentioned a little bit about, what's going on in Chad or other parts of Central Africa there. So, I don't want to diminish the what's happening in many of these parts of the world, right? That are unfortunately just very horrendous for what people have to endure on a daily basis. And we have been very, very blessed and very fortunate to live in a country like the United States. That said, earlier in the podcast, we were talking about how we're at war. And I know I said more than once that our own government has decided that we're the enemy. So how do you kind of reconcile those two thoughts? On the one hand, I'm proud to be, and of course I'm very proud to be an American. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm very proud to be an American. That's why I kind of want to fight for my country and my people here, right? And I'm very proud for some of the blessings or the rights, the privileges that I've had as an American. Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, it's important that we kind of have this broad or expansive understanding of war, and that war is not always about bombs, tanks, guns, etc. War nowadays is also about the social engineering or the narratives that control you, or the narratives that pit this group of people against this group of people, or the narratives that get people to operate against their own best interest, etc. So again, I would never ever diminish the circumstances in which many people live across the world, that are at least on the surface much less fortunate than our circumstances here. But at the same time, it's exactly those circumstances that we live in here that appear to be good that then lull us into this false sense of security. And then we find ourselves on the couch, so to speak, metaphorically speaking, when we should be actively engaged and fighting. And I don't necessarily mean like physically, kinetically fighting, but fighting against those who are trying to destroy us. And they're destroying us in ways that we don't readily recognize because, right, unfortunately, too many people have a very narrowed view of what war looks like. And if there aren't explosions, and if people aren't bleeding, then they don't realize that they're in a war. And there's something that I've said before, I'll say it again here, but the fastest way to lose a war is to realize too late that you're in one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Very powerful. Wake up, people, wake up. Go ahead, Lucas.
Yeah. I just wanted to share one story since I was thinking about it in the past couple of days. While I was getting reprimanded and kicked out of the military, I was put on a lot of division level staff duty shifts, 24-hour shifts. And anyways, long story short, I was paired up with a senior ranking enlisted guy that's been on plenty of deployments. And they tell you a lot of stories of when they're on deployment and some of the crazy things that they've done. Well, his story kind of stuck out with me in that when he was deployed, he was ordered to do an ambush, and that's essentially where the enemy is not prepared for an attack. So his sentiments on that were that, you're basically firing on people that aren't firing on you back. So you're the first one to initiate it. Anyways, I asked him how the other soldiers felt when they were conducting that ambush, and he said there was mixed feelings of how some people thought it was disturbing, and they ended up getting out of the military, and maybe they got some PTSD. But long story short, I asked him, do you think that's capable of the American military doing something like that on American soil? And he said, no way. That's no way, shape, and form even possible. But I do want people to realize that that could be a possibility. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but hopefully the people in the military know exactly what they're doing, what kind of orders they'll be given. Because if they followed an order that was illegal, that would basically, assuming that was the case, which it is, I mean, how many other orders are military personnel going to follow that are also legal? So that's goes back to accountability once more, is that we want to stop this before something worse happens. It's a possibility. I'm just saying, beware and keep that in mind. Be vigilant.
That's a great point there, Lucas. Something for us to actually, that's worth sitting on and pondering and ensuring, obviously, that if that doesn't end up being the situation, God forbid, because my goodness, they like seeing men like you, like you're exactly what we need in there, right? And they kind of culled the herd, so to speak, of men really willing to fulfill their oath on the threats, foreign and domestic.
Yeah,
and
when you're talking about the 8,000 active duty that have been kicked out, and there's tens of thousands of Reserve National Guard. I mean, if you look at the personality traits of Brad, of Sanusi, I mean, if you take all of them together, you're getting some of the most morally upright people.
Yes, that's it.
Religious, believe in God. A lot of them have convictions. A lot of them are free thinkers. They ask a lot of really great questions. So you literally purged like the most valuable people out of the military. Like those that are willing to actually ask questions and stand up for something and put their not their lives on the line, but their careers, their pensions, their benefits. A lot of people sold their souls for money, and I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to pass judgment. I'm just saying that there's always repentance, there's always coming out and fixing the problem afterwards if you didn't know exactly what you're doing. But I mean, we have to get at least some type of good leaders back into the military, and that's the first step. I mean, what else is the solution? At the bare minimum, that's what we should be doing. But I regress.
That was some great insight there, Lucas, and I appreciate you bringing up the situation and then asking the question like you're just real in tune with kind of everything that's going on. And it's why we're here, folks. It's why we were put in this moment in time, and I'm glad to see men like you leading by example and seizing the moment to show up in such a selfless manner to whatever positive impact you can have. We're going to trip up along the way. We're human, but I love eating humble pie. Someone wants to bring some receipts on something. I'm incorrect. That it's important that we seek that meekness as a child, that in a sense, the more we know, the less we know, but we got to do our due diligence and staying informed. We all have a responsibility. Let's accept that responsibility to all of our loved ones, and more important, our freaking loving creator. It's just paramount. Like, once again, what are we taking with us when we exit this world? Other than our experience, and what we do on behalf of love for one another. I just feel so convicted in that. And for whatever reason, I see too many of my Christian brothers and sisters turning the other cheek. And I'm like, this is a table flipping moment, It's not a turn the other cheek. We could pray on behalf of the lost sheep, but for those that are actually inflicting evil and inflicting this level of genocide and tyranny, like, we are to show up and put an end to their reign. And it's right here, right now. Like, otherwise, once again, like, when the next thing happens, don't act surprised, because I'm not going to sit here in a sense of like, told you so. It's just like, it's more so, it's bigger than that. It's like we had an opportunity, and it just is what it is. Golly, you guys brought so much. I'm so appreciative of your time. Like, I feel personally blessed by this encounter, and even though I'm showing up with all my defects as we speak, what do you, let's just tap into kind of like just our intuition for a second. What do you feel kind of slash and closing here? I mean, I might even have to step out for a quick break. Nature calls. I mean, what do you do? But with that, like tap into your intuition. What do you feel in this moment most impressed to just share with the world, with our listeners, just anything?
Oh, man, I could start out by saying, just like for me, the reason why,
I brought up, I wasn't trying to get too personal, you know what I mean? I didn't, but the reason why I shared my own background and information is just to get people to see out there that, hey, this is not about race. This is not about religion. This is about humanity, right? So guys like me, very unique, but I'm echoing the same sentiments, that few people are echoing, you know what I mean? So that should tell you right there that something isn't right in the world when very few people are speaking about something. So yeah, just stay hyper vigilant, know that it's not about race, it's not about religion, it's about humanity. And it all starts with turning back to God and using him as a force to help you, fight this unseen evil. So.
One thing that I'll say, one thing that I've learned over the last couple of years is that I would say kind of like the power of the minority. So I think most of us assume that in general circumstances, the majority of people are right. And if you're not doing what the majority is doing, then you're probably wrong. And it's funny because in the military, this is certainly taught. You guys certainly have heard the saying, like, one of these doesn't look like the other. So, you don't want to show up to formation and you're the only one wearing a certain uniform and everyone else is wearing something else, because that means you're wrong. Or everyone else has their rifle, you don't. And you're like, oh man, I like bad day. But here's what I've kind of learned, right? Is that because of the social engineering, the conditioning, the narratives that are just propagated to such an extent that most people assimilate the messages from these narratives without even realizing it. What that means is that no, the majority typically is not right when it comes to trying to navigate through this stuff and find the actual truth. And in fact, those who are actually able to kind of parse through these narratives, a lot of times, not only are they in the minority, but it may actually be a fairly small minority. So just kind of understanding that, like that's been kind of hard, because I think most of us assume that the majority of people, generally speaking, are in the right. Like if you're driving the opposite direction of everybody else, yeah, you're probably in the wrong. You probably turned down a one-way road without realizing it, But when it comes to trying to navigate, though, for the truth, it can be a little bit different, but it's hard. Regardless of, whatever you learned growing up or whatever you've been taught or your principles or whatever, when you find yourself being the only person, or at least one in a very small group, speaking up against a much larger majority, it can be difficult.
Wow, you're right. Dude, there was a great teacher clip I played recent. It might have been some episodes back. I don't mess around here other than the last little hiccup. But we'll be back full-fledged, folks. But the teacher that did this experiment of unjustly just dismissing a student from the classroom, and how powerfully he brought it full circle with these students and not speaking up, right? It just really tugged on my heartstrings and was like very profound. I definitely feel called. In fact, I'll make note of it, and we're gonna start off one of these episodes with that very clip, because that's just seizing this moment in time and not being out of fear in this life. Like, that has been one of the greatest gifts for me, that I can speak out personally, right? And I say it not because I need validation, not because I need more people on board with the same ideologies and beliefs as I. No, it's just been the single greatest blessing in my life. And when I felt God's love, our loving creator, like for me and for all his children, there was this profound shift in my life where I started valuing my spiritual life and death over my mortal life and death. So, I mean, there's 365 fear nots in this very Bible, one for each day of the year. Is that just coincidence or unique? Like, for you to determine, but we're not to fear in this freaking existence. There's something more important, right, than all of that I just hope and pray we all grasp while we're here. And go ahead.
I just want to ask you a quick question. I know, just from your perspective, I know you having an open platform like this, and you just speaking out constantly about this on your own platform. I know this is a great level of scrutiny I'm sure you must face, right? And for us, we already made the sacrifice, gave up our careers, but for you, every day, every time you post, you're looking at people coming after you, you're looking at people speaking out against you, and you're literally dealing with it on a daily basis, or monthly, weekly, however long you post. What's the driving force that keeps you going? Because I know me personally, I had my incident with the Army. They kicked me out. I went through my little thing, but now it's over. I'm just sitting now. Nobody knows even I was in the Army. I don't see these same leaders again. I still feel the pain a little bit, but nobody's yelling at my face, humiliating me anymore. But for you, you're still doing it, right? Yeah. It takes bravery to do this, like to keep being in front of camera and still echo those same sentiments. Almost like you're asking for, hey, give me more pain, give me more humiliation. Like, what keeps you going? I'm just curious.
That's a very powerful question. I you should have asked me before so I could have prepared, knocked out of the park. No, that's irrelevant, because we got to let go of pride and ego, man. It's sinful desires, and the evil loves to prey on that in this life, I tell you. And to whatever capacity I could show up, let the haters essentially hate. If I could help one individual, breathe some light into that individual, like, that's a win, and you look historically and biblically, look at how many met a pretty nasty end, from kind of our leaders. And so some just tells me in kind of this mortal existence, because we get wrapped up, and that's kind of the devil's domain, if you will. And he likes to masquerade as God, and lead people astray as though, and then they feeds pride and ego, and we just sit there and excuse ourselves. That's where it's so crucial for us to be really honest with ourselves. And that's where I do give it all glory to God, because as far as it is nice on a mortal sense to hear from my brothers and sisters, such as like you just put, receiving encouragement, some not even accolades, but just, powerful words such as like bringing up courage or something to that nature. But it is all glory to God. Like, he's given me this motivation. He's given me this, not give a F's is to the haters, and just showing up. Like, that's truly the intent here, is whatever I can do, and to ever my capacity, which I trip and fall all the freaking time, man. I'm so human, especially with this line, man. I'm telling you, biowarfare is no freaking joke. We got to put a freaking stop to this before I feel the devil, the evil one here, manipulates man to such an extent that it disrupts our real spiritual connections. Because I've been there on death's door. How does one go from wanting to end his life and living a selfish, self-centered life to being grateful for even this bioweapon in me? Because in a huge way, it's propelled me past my own existence. It's hard to even articulate in a singular episode, especially feeling the way I'm feeling today. But I'm encouraged. Let's make it less about me, because I'm encouraged just with you guys showing up with your testimonies. Holy smokes, Tahir, you got a testimony I'd love to dive into. And I know Lucas, I need to get to know Brad more. I'm not gonna lie, but holy smokes, like you guys encourage me, right? So I don't know if I directly answered it too much or like Lucas, we tried preparing me for this episode. And did I not say I have a problem directly, answering things like right here, I'll humbly eat some pie is to, I need to get cleaner with my words and my abilities. Maybe I just get too charged up, but,
no, huge respect. I just want to give you respect. Like I said, that's a very brave thing to do. It's a very brave thing to do what you're doing continuously. Huge respect. Also, Brad too. I know Brad is very. I saw some of his Twitter posts, man. Very active on Twitter.
Yes,
saying
I've seen it.
Huge respect. A lot of guys, a lot of us just filed a lawsuit, sitting at home. Here and there, some guys are appearing on podcasts here and there, but the guys that are actually still having a voice, speaking for everybody else, I think that's another level of braveness that I humbly want to acknowledge. I'm not that brave, but I acknowledge that.
You're here now, brother. Like that takes courage, that takes bravery, and you're leading by example, and you're exposing a lot of like personal vulnerabilities too. So my hat's off to you. And the more we can do this, I just would pray that it vibrates with people in a way to ignite that within themselves. Because the more we can get unmuzzled and fulfill chats like this, actual conversations, and not just be boom, like freaking evil wants us to be, that in and of itself, gentlemen, I believe will be the solutions we're all seeking. It's like we could sit here and try to articulate the direct course of action, but I believe this whole episode, as you look at things kind of a bigger view, you encompassed it all. It's all here. We don't need to directly hit that nail on the head, even though we're human and we're going to keep going and driving these nails till whatever happens. But hopefully more people will fall into their calling. So you brought up a good point with Brad on X. Does anyone want to plug what you're engaged in on a personal level? I would love for this to personally benefit you. And I want the listeners to understand the more support you can gain on these platforms from views, clicks, likes, comments, right? Like comments are powerful. Just the engagement and the shares, so important, could help create momentum in a huge sense, and consider financial support. Excuse me. With more, let's just say monies. I hate that aspect to this life. I truly do. But it can be used as a tool for good, right? And I'm a limited being, and I do know on something like this, at the point I could get, let's just say, a tech guru, someone greater than me, on creating shorts and reels and clickable things, then I believe futuristically we could do you a better service by having a profound following, so people can magnify if they could grasp and they're excited about what we're attempting to do here, then they can magnify. And I don't want to make it about Unmuzzled. I want to make it about you guys too. But just the idea of that, I mean, canceling your freaking Netflix and putting that towards one of you warriors every month, and multitude of people do that. Not only do they become more blessed in their lives because they're not digesting poison on Netflix, but there will be blessing to financially supporting, because that will, none of us can guarantee a secure tomorrow, but in doing things like that, I just know, like, it's gonna have a difference. It would lead to saving more souls, saving more lives, less suffering, and that becomes a bigger blessing than we can even imagine in this existence. Because just to save one soul, for someone to actually consider the glory, the excitement, just the beauty that would come of that after this existence. I don't believe we can even imagine that, you know, and or put into words, because I'm kind of just getting long-winded here. But I just want us all to ponder that. I had something else to close out there. My goodness, I'm so freaking human. So to the plug. Let's start plugging some things.
Yeah.
All right, I'll go. So, like, if people want to find me, they can find me two places.
Okay.
If you want to find me on Twitter, you can find me at BradMiller1010. If you want to find me on Substack, it's bradmiller10.substack.com. So those are the two places where people can most easily find me.
Perfect.
Twitter at bradmiller1010. Substack, you can find me bradmiller10.substack.com.
Fantastic.
All right. And, you know, for me to plug, I mean, the thing I can tell people is follow their purpose. Everyone's got a purpose in this life. And so whether you believe in different religion, regardless of that, I mean, if you think it's God that is, I mean, you have to eventually figure that out, that you have choices in your life to make. And you can make the right choice or you can make the wrong choice. There's always a choice in everything you do. And so it's, like I said, it's never too late. If you're in a position where you can have major influence, decision-making power, and to come out and express sincere apology and try to change in a positive way how everything works, if you have the opportunity to do that, take it, do it, because only good things can come from that. And it's never good to stay quiet, and it's never good to conceal bad things that are currently happening. So it's always good to shine a light on truth and honesty and doing the right thing always. And that's all I have to leave with.
Let's lead by example, fellas. I'll freaking apologize that it took me nearly 40 years of my life to show up in this sense. I got so wrapped up in this existence, and I'm telling you, it was destructive. It was poisonous. It was empty. I hurt a lot of people along the way, but I was led on that path. Luckily, I was saved, right? And it's all glory to God, man. I tell you, it's a beautiful thing. So, yeah, for more people to find that courage, it's everything right now in this time. What about you, Tahir? Are you on some socials that we could plug?
Nah, currently no socials. No socials currently, but I just want to say follow Lucas, Lucas Wozniak, Brad Miller, and
yes,
follow this YouTube channel. This is monumental. This is one of the few people out here that I've seen to be as authentic and genuine as you on this channel.
Brad, you're navigating YouTube.
Yeah.
Who's navigating YouTube? Me? I'm Rumble, brother. YouTube's too. Come on now. We could take snips of this, but this very episode will give me another strike. YouTube.
Rumble.
Yeah, no. I'm glad you even made that. Let's just say error, like whatever. That's a perfect error to have, because folks need to get off those controlled platforms. Yeah. It's not a question as to whether you would be impacted. You 100% would end up manipulated to one degree or another from spending X amount of time on such a platform as that. Like, it's no secret. They've diminished truth. They've weaponized, they've done so many things, but the censorship, it's beyond dangerous. We can't even put a finger on as to how detrimental it has been. Like, that's how they stood up even a pandemic. I don't know anyone that freaking died from COVID. I know people that died from Brad's point, the horrendous, like, killing incentivized protocol from the hospitals. I know people that died from remdesivir and the vent and malnourishment and not receiving actual life-saving care such as ivermectin and HCQ. There's a reason why. I mean, the same talking heads that demonize those things had now reported, now it's supposedly a good thing. But they expect us just to be, and so many have. Like that just kind of highlights the poisons, everything we discussed before, because how is it we're not even acknowledging those that lie to us and keep tuning into that type of stuff? That's where, golly, to get off as much entertainment, to really just do our due diligence. Like, this can be entertaining. This right here, you gentlemen, I'll listen to this back, and I'm just gonna obviously rip myself in two, but in a humble sense. But I'll be elated to hear back everything you guys shared. It's just crucial. So anyway, YouTube, dangerous. Rumble, good. We got that.
Correction. Follow, like, and subscribe on Rumble. Correction.
There we go. Appreciate you. Any other burning desires? Because I genuinely mean it, fellas. Like, I want y'all back, whether it's a group chat, whether it's individual, whatever you fancy. I just hope and pray that this very episode only leads to bigger blessings in all your lives.
Absolutely.
Bigger opportunities. I hope freaking Stu Peters or Charlie Kirk or Dan Bongino or Russell Brand or any of these guys will actually see, like, whoa, these guys lived it. They lived the tyranny. They stood up for what we need. They're leading by example. Like, guy, why are they not? They need to reach out to you fellas and have you back to back. And both, before I forget, I want to plug the Forgotten Soldiers. What John and Scott are doing over there is freaking utterly amazing. And having warrior after warrior such as yourselves on podcasts like that, and how they're even going to open it up to the civilian side of things, because we're all part of the same family. We're all fighting that same battle, and we need to gain the support of the people as in a whole, really, to just have that positive impact, whatever we can. That's what's important. Whether we ride the ship, you can't let that dishearten you, and do not discredit the impact you can have, listeners. With that, I'm just going to leave you guys any closing remarks.
Yeah, I've got one. So, not just America, but the world. What the world needs, what we yearn for, are heroes. That's what. There's a lack of heroes nowadays. Too many cowards. There's not enough people standing up in positions where they can make a difference. And so, what we need is heroes. We need people that take charge and correct injustices of evil. I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Lucas.
Yeah, let me jump in on that. Just my closing thought would be, unfortunately, we live in a society where, everyone wants to be the hero until it's time to actually fight the battle. Then suddenly everyone wants somebody else to fight it. So to Lucas's point, which I wholeheartedly agree with, is, hey, don't look for somebody else to fight your battle. We got to all get off the couch, and we got to, kind of lock arms, and we got to fight for our own people and our own country.
Amen. Wow. Uh-oh. Tahir, you're muted.
All I want to say is it takes a lot of courage to be brave. Strength and courage to be brave. If your own heroes, your nation heroes that are pretty much signed a contract to sacrifice their lives to defend your freedoms, are standing up for this fight, then you should be able to feel encouraged and empowered to stand up and fight this fight as well. So take us for example, and use that to help you fight your own personal fight and the bigger fight as well for this country and for the world.
Wow. Fellas, I'm truly honored. Thank you for your service. Thank you for continually to show up on behalf of everyone around. Like, undoubtedly, Lucas, you, in my eyes, are all the heroes you just called out for everyone to be. So my hat is off to you from the bottom of my heart for everything you've done. And I feel your service in a huge sense has just begun. And it's glorious. It's beautiful. It's going to be challenging. It's going to be tough. It's an uphill battle. I mean, evil doesn't freaking fight fair. And it's not fair, right? But hey, is what it is. So I think we need to show up in 2 to 3 times the numbers to fight back that evil, right? In an effective way. So, listeners, with that being said, I love each and every one of you. Do not discredit the impact you can have Okay. We do have some affiliations and calls to action. Check out Patriot Mobile. They're the only Christian conservative mobile network out there. They, in fact, are fighting on behalf of pro-life, veterans, so many things. Check out their webpage for themselves. Click the link below or call them. At the point you call them, just simply mention Unmuzzled Chat or Unmuzzled, I believe, and they will waive fees and take care of you. We touched a lot on refining oneself, getting out the poisons. Check out Bond Charge. I do attribute to the infrared sauna blanket helping fire up this body and its natural ways of detoxifying the body. You're getting 15% off through our affiliation with them. Just click the link below. Check it out. If you want to magnify the detoxification of heavy metals and forever chemicals, check out Masterpiece. That tincture is a miracle tincture. It's worked wonders in my life. And I keep saying, gosh dang it, this is the freaking position I'm in. I need to order more. I'm just going to put a big order here. See, I need notes. Just check it, try it out for yourself. And a gratitude journal will do wonders as well. Other than that, check out Black Eagle Apparel. Get some freedom merch. One nation under God. My goodness, let's bring that back. Okay, evil effectively, and this is a war tactic. This is no coincidence that they pulled God out of our schools, God out of our, even like our politics. Gosh dang, to have someone come up and want to give glory to God in a prayer before they share their views on things, that would mean wonders to me, but it's got to be authentic, right? Anyway, check out Black Eagle Apparel, and they are the only ones exclusively to have an Unmuzzled Chat tee. So if you want to support this podcast, get yourself an Unmuzzled Chat tee, embody that, become unmuzzled, and see what difference you'll make. With that being said, God bless you all. God bless our heroes that showed up on this podcast. I appreciate you. And God bless America. Until next time, take care.